apologize. We were attending the Conservation District meeting this morning. It started at 8:30, ran a little longer. Had quite a few public comments. We will move to review of work session discussion meeting minutes.
I did not have any additions or corrections.
Department head report. Yes, sir.
Good morning.
District Attorney Lozier.
This is pretty simple stuff, but I figured I didn't raise it all at one time. We have a lot of programs upstairs connected to the Central Court, people in treatment, probation issues. And what I did was I worked with, well, an issue was communication, how to communicate with the defendants, the families, the survivors up there. We have programs going on. The programs make difference. Sometimes the defense lawyers don't always communicate things, and sometimes the defense lawyers don't know. So I had behavioral health, so the contractors work with a nice poster. And my goal is to make a big version of this and hang it upstairs outside courtroom 3. You guys control courtroom 3 in the hallways. But then I got to thinking, I'd like to make communications regarding Veterans Court diversion and this diversion. And I think we can communicate to the people upstairs, some of the other programs we have available, contact information for services, drug treatment, those sorts of things. So what I'd like to do, rather than just get your traditional poster somewhere, is if you all could consider letting me put up a bulletin board up there on courtroom 3. I suspect it probably want to be under the control of maybe me and the public defender and APO, because we'd be the ones that have the information regarding the available services and available programs. I'd be happy to fund whatever. But if you all could consider allowing us to put up a bulletin board up there that we could control, just to communicate contact information, available services to the needed population. That's all. But this is a sample. I'm going to blow this up like 14 by 17, whatever. It's just one of the samples of what we can do. I think it's good information to pass out. Just trying to figure out a way to do it.
This would be outside courtroom 3 in the hallway.
So if you could tell me where to put it, absolutely.
Would it be open to, let's say, other legal services? Let's just say.
I would think, because it's criminal.
Neighborhood partner, like, are there other neighborhood legal service groups and stuff like that?
Neighborhood crime?
They probably, I would think neighborhood legal services would want to put something on there, but they want to have a body controlling what goes on. It's not just lawyers taking business partners. So that's why I'm saying maybe be the public defender at APO or something like that, if I work together. But I know you have other bulletin boards in the courthouse. I'm not sure how you control those.
Yeah.
But they got to control the content. So think about that,
Yeah.
okay? Because again, I would like to hang this up somewhere upstairs. That this is my first priority. I would do the same thing regarding tell people like veteran, because sometimes, like, the lawyer may not know that their defendant is a veteran. We're not the ones to ask, because sometimes they don't know the retail theft diversion program. So I like to have some posters, and a bulletin board might be a better solution than just taping these things on the glass window at the defense room. So that's the request.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other department head report? Hearing none, we'll move to financial report. Corey.
All right. Copy of the report. So what you have in front of you is the activity through June 30th, 2019. This is the meeting that was rescheduled. I was here. But on a year-to-date basis, as of the first 2 quarters of 2019, we collected total revenues of about $60.2 million, sort of 76.4% of budget total revenues. And that's pretty much in line with our historical trend. As you can see, is our property taxes make up the biggest piece of that. We're at $52.2 million as of mid-year. That's 92.8% of the budget. I did pull some updated numbers just so you know. We're probably right around 98% collected at this point in time, but as of June 30th, we were at 92.8. So everything's looking good as far as projections and what we've been collecting on county income tax. Departmental earnings, intergovernmental revenues, reimbursement income are the other big categories there. They're all pretty much running in line with historical averages, which got us back up to that total of $60.2 million year-to-date June 30th. So I don't see anything there that really sticks out that's an issue to follow up on. Pretty much everything, the trends are running the way we expected them from the budget. Expenditure-wise, so far, we have an expenditure budget of $78.8 million. We've spent $34.2 as of mid-year. So we're at about 43.4%. Big items there, salary and benefits, we're at 17.7. That's at 42.7% of the budget. One of the things to keep in mind here is there weren't any raises effective in the first half of the year, and also does not include the pension payment isn't made till the second half. So that's why that looks like it's behind. There is a reserve set there for increases that were there, and there were some pay adjustments that'll be adjusted in the second half. So we'll see that percentage go up, even though it looks like it's behind right now. Debt payments, we are at $4.6 million, which is 43.5% of the budget. That is up a little bit from last year, mainly due to the timing of those payments, but the majority of those payments will be made in the second half of the year, which is typical. So nothing really to point out there. And then you have subsidies. Subsidies are pretty much in line with where we were last year, slightly over at 59.5%, but those will come back into line. That's just the timing of when those payments get made. County match, same thing. We're at 51.2% of budget, $2.3 million, and same thing there. That'll normalize through the end of the year. So on budget for both of those. Pass-throughs, we're at $1.5 million. That's the money we receive that just pretty much comes in and goes right out. That's just a timing issue. So we're at 55.7%, $1.5 million for the year. That typically doesn't happen equally through the year. It's just when we get it, it's spent right away, gets passed through. Contracted services, we were about in line with where we were last year. At this time, $1 million, we're 36.9% of budget. So it might be something that we see a little bit of savings on through the end of the year. And then the other categories, there's really not any other individual categories that were over 50% of budget that we're concerned with at this point. So you flip to the next page, page 5, there's just a couple of departmental notes, and pages 7 and 8 have the detail for each department. A couple items, there's a typo in there, I should say over 50%. These are the departments that have over 50% of their expenditure budgets through the end of the year. ESU, as you know, they're at 97.9% as of June 30th. There were a couple of events that weren't planned events that they were based on emergent public safety needs in the community. So there was an additional budget adjustment that had been proposed to cover some of those events. But they were at 97.9% as of June 30th. Library Commission, this is really just the timing of the payments. They're ahead because we made the payments because we received them from the state. So this is a normal timing one. And county matches was over $5.4 million, 59.7% of the budget. But again, same thing, timing. That's the timing, and that's historically where we've been at. So not really too many big issues other than the ESU just pointing out that those are unplanned events. So the next pages that you have just give you the detail of all that information. So page 6 is the revenues and expenditures by account classification. Pages 7 and 8 are by department, if you need that page. And then the last page is the balance sheet, that's page 9. This reflects, you can see our total assets as of June 30th were $37.8 million. That's down about $6.8 million from the prior year. But as you can see below, that's primarily because we paid back the line of credit. So our liabilities are down about 11.5, which puts us at about 36 million right now. But again, just to put that into context, we'll be spending that down as we go forward. So at this point, it looks like we may have a little bit of surplus that we can maybe, do some of the capital projects that were in the budget, but not on the level that it would have been last year. So that concludes my budget report. If there's any questions on the budget, I can address them.
I got a couple, but it's now the best time to do it.
You can ask now, Mr. Rules.
Excellent.
Does the board have any questions first?
I have a few. So, the debt payments that we're making, are we making the regular payment or are we
Correct.
making above the regular payment?
Yep, they're scheduled payments. When you issue a bond, you have scheduled debt payments. Those increased in 2019, so these are the regularly scheduled payments. The only one that from a timing standpoint, that we would have accelerated was the repayment of the Tran for this year.
Right.
Because we didn't need it, so we paid it back early.
Okay. We're saving quite a bit of interest.
We are
in
seeing
doing
quite a
that.
bit of interest, yeah. I
Okay.
mean, probably 200 some thousand probably, till all said and done. So yeah, by paying that back early, we're gonna save a significant portion.
We have to make a decision on community college payment too.
At some point, yeah. Yeah, because the payment, from the budget standpoint, we did defer about $1 million of that payment into next year. So that would be something that would be on the table going forward. Obviously, we're still in some negotiations for the unions. We don't have complete clarity on where we're at there. But yeah, that would be something that in the near future, we probably want to discuss on whether or not we want to make an adjustment budget-wise.
And on page 5, it does say about the ESU department. There have been a couple events where there have been some charges that came down that it was over budget. Is there an easier way to manage that so that we're not caught off guard? I realize the essence of ESU you can't predict, but since we're already over budget now, is there something that we can do to kind of alleviate the surprise come December?
Well, I think that's why we originally, when we did the budget, we do have a small contingency reserve that was set in, and that would cover these type of things. So as far as the budget goes, I mean, when we originally did it, it was based on the number of events that we expected, and there's really no way for us to predict.
How are you gonna predict the presidential visit?
Yeah, I mean, how many events they're gonna get called to. So that's the best estimate at that time. We do the best that we can to set up a contingency reserve for these type of events in the budget, so.
You know, we forecast 2 barricaded gunmen or hostage rescue events a year based on historical, just past knowledge. This year we had 7 through the first week of August. And then you had the presidential visit on top of that. So those are items where the local police department come on a situation and they call for an emergency heavy backup. So we have to respond. We try to respond intelligently, but for those who request by the local police departments, we have to respond to. So 7 was so outside of the normal meeting. We're working with Corey to make sure we look at next year to try to come up with a smart way to forecast, so we don't get into this need to transfer things that like we did this year.
Was that presidential detail, was that a request by the White House to ESU, or was that a decision that was made internally in the courthouse by your department?
And we were asked to assemble at a standby location. Now I think there were, I'm not to say how many, there were several SWAT type units assembled. We were one of the backups. And we weren't involved in the initial negotiations, but we were asked, I think, just at the last minute to come and be available.
Is that something that the White House would reimburse the taxpayers of Beaver County?
Apparently, no.
Oh.
They don't reimburse local law enforcement for anything like that. So that's been an issue. I think that happened in,
Ambridge.
yes, when Trump came through the first time. And I think that was an issue with El Paso, Texas, where Trump went in last week to El Paso. On the tarmac, he was told that he had to reimburse them for their expenses for his last visit to El Paso. So I guess this is just a way to do business.
Nothing's changed. I'm not gonna tell you the event that I was involved, because I don't wanna date myself.
Washington and his horse.
Washington never came this far as president.
Yeah?
He stopped at Greensburg and burned it.
But no, what you just said is true.
Yeah, they don't reimburse.
So this is not unlike any other presidential administration. I see. This is my first one experiencing, so, thank you. I think that was all I have.
Mr. Rowley?
Yes, there were a couple. And while we're on the presidential thing, Obama did come through. Did we have requirements then for his visit from the airport through Beaver and then to wherever he was going?
I'm way before Obama.
Well, he visited
Somewhere between
Kretschmeyer's.
Washington
He
and
went to
Yeah.
Kretschmeyer's, but I don't know.
Well,
I don't think-
the night after
Yeah,
he was
he was
nominated,
close.
he flew into Beaver.
Yeah, that's why.
August of 16. And they had a substantial police presence surrounding all of Beaver.
But they didn't when he visited the bakery, did they?
That's a drive-through.
I'm sure they had them.
Oh,
They were there. They were everywhere.
I know I was walking down the center of the street and sort of get off to the side. Okay, well, that was interesting. The pickup that's been noted of $6 to $7 million or underrun from last year, is that considered in here? Do we have 6 or 7 million additional?
So that would be on the balance sheet, yes, that's included in that balance. So when we talk about surplus, last year there was a $4.8 million increase in general fund balance, okay?
Okay.
So that leaves us at about 9.7 unrestricted. The total fund balance, I believe, was 12.7. Now, within there are restrictions, so there's some that's restricted for debt service, there's other restrictions for program purposes, et cetera. So what we're talking about at the county level would be approximately 9.7 at the end of 2018. And that's what we had planned on in the current budget, was spending approximately $1 million of the prior fund balance. And that was mainly for capital projects slash, some contingency, et cetera.
Like the roof when it was leaking?
Well, right, because, and those we were gonna sort of wait there because we didn't know exactly where, some of the union negotiations, and they're still not closed.
Wow.
How that's gonna impact the
Mhm.
budgets and those kind of things. So we have spent some money. I mean, some of that was set aside for, election machines, et cetera. That's, since we financed some of that, and the first payment's been made, et cetera. So.
Well, that dealt with the last two questions. One you brought up, interestingly, is the school and whether or not our delay in giving the college any money. Don't we have about $1 million of money that they have requested and that we have acknowledged, but we held off this year in giving it to them, part of the budget?
Well, so the discussion was last year at budget time, yes, there was about $1 million that we had decided that, in order to try and balance that budget, to defer till next year. So that's what would be back on the table, if there is a surplus.
What was the number that we gave them though?
The total, I had
900.
No,
which,
we have given them over $3 million.
yeah, 3.6,
And we
I
pulled
want
back
to
$1
say, it
million.
was like 4 million.
So it wasn't that we didn't give them any money.
Yeah.
So.
It was delaying the
And this
last
was, yeah,
million.
so what we had worked out was really to get them through, we would then pay them more next year. Now, since some things have changed, that can be back on the table.
Yes.
I think what we were waiting on was to have some clarity on the union agreements, negotiations, so we know exactly where we're at there, and then revisit that, which is what had been discussed with the community college.
Which should, hopefully, if we picked up that 3 or 4 or $6 million
Well-
money that was not anticipated, the
Well-
expenditure of that $1 million.
What we need to be
This year
careful of
is
is there's a
better.
lot of expenditures coming up. There's a potential reassessment. We've got a lot of expenditures and capital needs that need to come up in the future that we need to make sure we're balancing cash flow and those things.
I don't know if you got the memo, but it's not potential.
Right, sorry. It needs to quantify.
That's a memo, but it's not.
Sorry, there is a reassessment that we need to quantify what that
Yes.
cost is. And I don't think we
Okay,
have
that
that
was-
number yet. Sorry, no.
That was one, and the other is the voting machines. Do we have to go to bond with the cost of the voting machines that was not covered by the state?
That's already, that was set up by payments over so many years, and that is in the budget for this year to make the first
Yes.
payment. So we will be budgeting for next, we won't have to go to bonds now.
Good.
Yeah, and the first payment's been
Yeah,
made.
the first payment's been
Yeah,
made.
it's been made.
Okay, well, that was my concern, was voting, school payment, reserve, as to whether or not we could use some of that pickup on the reserve.
Well, I believe you're calling that the rainy day fund.
Well,
No.
we need a certain amount of capital, you know, in order to do business, and what that allows us to do, you know, we talked about the line of credit, or the TRAN, and really not needing that in the extended period. What that does is that saves us, I mean, that's probably gonna save us in the neighborhood of $200,000 this year, so, you know, we need to have a certain cushion, because the other piece that we have is, you know, we also are self-insured for our health insurance, and we need to make sure that we have adequate cash flows to cover those needs as they arise, and that's what that contingency will do. And then you pile on top of that, you know, what do we have that we need to spend money on in the near future in capital projects, et cetera, you know, cost of reassessment, those kind of things.
Mhm.
And realistically, you want to be somewhere in the 2-month range of liquid cash, and that's still not exactly, I mean, we're building to that. It's not exactly where we'd like to be, but it's improving. So that gets us into a better financial position, which theoretically.
That should be about 3% or 4%?
Oh, no.
Total reserve?
No, much higher than that. You should be in the probably 10 to 15% range.
And where are we now?
We're at 9 million on 70 some, so a little over 12, I think.
Okay.
So it's not, I mean, and what that does, it also helps our financial picture. When we go to do bonds and those kind of things, that will
Yes.
show a healthier picture, which should also save us on interest costs down the line, because that's one of the things that helps out our credit rating.
So
is showing
that
we're-
should be getting better than the drop in level of, what did we go from the AAA bond to
Yeah, and that's what we're trying
A
to.
B
we're
plus
trying to
rating
improve,
or whatever.
Exactly, the financial picture and showing those reserves, adequate reserves on hand, and what those minimums are that they're looking for. I mean, we certainly don't want to drop below 10% if we can help it. You know, but really, the more cushion
Totally
we have
concur,
there, the
yeah.
better we should see our ratings be.
excellent? Thank you.
Any other questions for Cory before we move on? Hearing none. Board of Commissioners reports. Commissioner.
Mr. Woolley, a week or two ago, you asked for a statistics or some numbers on HR.
Yes.
I received this form. I didn't know if you received it or not.
Yes,
You did? Okay,
Yes.
very good.
I did, and it was, I liked the details and
You
looked
liked
very
it?
good. I know we were gonna take off, what percentage of the total labor that when you started, it took a big time by buying them out, so it's, the head count hasn't changed, but the
The
total
salary.
expenditure,
Yes.
salary
Has.
has.
Healthcare's changed as well.
That's right, you picked up another couple points on that.
And I talked to Dan Colville yesterday, and his DPW workers are continuing to reinforce that room where the sheriff is going to be putting his, for lack of better words, I don't know what it's
Weapons.
called.
Weapons.
Gun closet. Thank you. Okay.
Weapons.
Weapons, yeah, from
PFAs.
PFAs. I was wondering if we could have a more in-depth conversation, because I'm thinking about how the sheriff is going to do that process, or how that affects the budget. I don't know how many weapons that are derived from stuff like that. What's the procedure? I mean, some people, I'm just thinking about people that I know have guns that are worth $20,000. Do we have to insure them? Do we have to, put them in bags that are non-rust proof, or, how are we cataloging that? I don't know the answer to those questions. So that's what I was kind of wondering, if we should maybe look into that a little bit more before we go full steam ahead. I don't know if there's do armories, certified armories do this? Maybe that could be something that could be outsourced and not have it in here.
The statute, if I could help, the statute requires police departments to take the firearms, the sheriff to take the firearms. There's a limited provision for an attorney. There is a provision for outside storage, so you could opt to go to a certified armorer. but right now there aren't any that fit that category. So the sheriff is really compelled by the fast nature of the passage of that statute to make a run for potentially scores or hundreds of firearms.
What guns will the sheriff get? Most of them are in the municipalities. When's it gonna, what's the difference between whether a gun's seized in a municipality or seized here?
When there's a PFA issue, or the other category is when you're convicted of a domestic violence misdemeanor or felony, say simple assault of your spouse. You have to turn over those firearms now within 24 hours, either to the police or the sheriff. And those could be one handgun. It could be a gun collection of 100 firearms. We had an incident several years ago where there was a guy literally owned a gun store. And New Brighton stored about 200 rifles for several years. So you don't know the volume. Some of them were stored for the limited length of time for a temporary PFA, and others are stored for a much longer period of time. The statute does give the means to dispose of the firearms if they can never be returned to the individual. But it could be any kind of firearm. It could be expensive, high-quality firearms.
Does it mean like a crossbow? I mean, when you describe weapon, does that mean,
No, these are shotguns, rifles, and pistols.
okay,
So most of the guns that we will have in our courthouse stored will be from PFAs.
PFAs or misdemeanors or felonies related to domestic violence.
Okay, so two.
So can someone in Center Township, they get a PFA, can they go surrender their gun to Center Township Police Department?
Yes,
How many are they gonna be able to store?
that's the problem, is most police departments don't have an evidence room large enough to store a large volume, and we don't know what that volume is gonna be. That's the disadvantage of having one small police departments.
all right. So I'd like to invite the sheriff to come to our public meeting to kind of go over his policy of how he's going to process those. Because I'm not sure what that looks like. And I'd really like to understand it better for my knowledge. Okay.
Cindy, should we call next week?
Next week, very good.
Anything else? Any other business? Hearing none, audience participation. Matt?
The meeting that you guys were at this morning, we were in the Conservation District. Just out of curiosity, you mentioned there was a lot of public comment and a lot of, that sort of back things up, or somebody did, I'm not sure it was. What happened?
The Conservation District held a public meeting about the 22-page audit they received from the DEP. They only addressed issues from the audit. They received 9 different public comments. Then I guess kind of for a second round, because eventually they started answering questions as well. They heard a lot of concern from residents and different activist groups on the different pipelines that were mentioned in the audit.
Okay. Just wondering.
Any other?
Laura Lee Bernke, Beaver County Genealogy and History Center. I just wanted to let you know that Tracy, our Register of Wills, was at our meeting on the 21st. She did a wonderful job. Everybody really enjoyed having her there and learning about what they do in the office there and what have you. So the next meeting that comes up is in September. It's September the 18th, and we are going to co-sponsor that with CCBC. It's going to be about the 2020 census. We have the representative coming from the U.S. Census Bureau is going to be there to speak, and Joe West from the courthouse is also going to come. So that'll be in the train station itself, so we can house as many people as possible. So as soon as we can get the word out, everybody in the county is welcome to come, get their questions answered, learn whatever they can. And then the other thing that we have up and coming is the genealogy, family genealogy and family history classes coming up. They will be 2 sessions this time. We'll have them on Monday evenings or Tuesday evenings. And to call the center for more information. Because October didn't cooperate, the first Monday session has to start in September. But then the next two will be October, and of course Tuesdays will all be October. So that's about it for us down there. Come on down and see us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Laura, what time is the meeting that you're co-sponsoring with CCBC on the 18th on the train station?
It'll be 7 o'clock.
7 o'clock.
I don't know how long to say it will last, because it'll just depend on audience participation, questions,
Sure.
that sort of thing.
Yeah, financial report came in, we got it from the agenda.
Out here. We're gonna move to solicitors. We took the solicitor out from the financial.
I don't know, if you might have seen earlier this week, in Oklahoma, there was a ruling on an opioid lawsuit for about $572 million against Johnson & Johnson. I contacted, as most people probably aware, the county is involved in one of these similar here in Pennsylvania, and I contacted our attorney yesterday, who verified that the Pennsylvania cases, which Beaver County is part of, are consolidated in Delaware County. They're currently doing discovery for that case, but he anticipates with this court ruling down in Oklahoma that the settlement talks will probably start getting serious based on now that that case sort of went through, sort of the first one that actually went to a trial.
They were requesting like $9 billion, correct? Or they were requesting a pretty high.
There was a high number. Some of the other pharmaceutical companies settled prior to that trial, and then that case went to trial. Johnson & Johnson got, like I said, that was probably going to get killed. It's a $572 million judgment against Johnson & Johnson. So being that sort of now has set a benchmark, they expect that there to be more serious settlement negotiations moving forward. So we'll see. Just wanted to update.
I noticed our colleagues from Westmoreland County, who I believe are in the same lawsuit, represented by the same
Right.
attorneys, were sharing the story and the settlement and discussing it. So.
So it's still moving along. It's still out there. And then we do need an executive session to discuss personnel matter.
Thank you. Any other audience participation since I jumped around? None? All right. Reason to reconvene?
No.
We will move into executive session, not reconvene.